It's time to go into overdrive at the old-fashioned home of a brand new promotion. Up next, Southern Virginia is rocked with a doubleheader of monster proportions. Welcome to a beautiful part of the country, Southern Virginia, home to some of the richest farmlands on the eastern United States and home to the Overdrive Monster Truck Tour. And I want to thank Gideon, Bernard, and crew for inviting us out for what is to be a kickoff of a brand new series in monster truck competition from right here in Southern Virginia. And this is kind of an old school fairground. It's a tight space. There's not a lot of operating room here, but these monsters came to put on a show, and some stories coming into this weekend. The return of the Seasock family to the seat of a monster truck, J.R. Seasock, in his new identity, playing hooky on that old J&B chassis that we used to see part of the Tim Menti camp, and his teammate and brother, Kyle Seasock, first year behind the wheel, second weekend ever behind the wheel of a monster truck at the wheel of Aftershock. We will also see CJ Menti, who unfortunately lost his father earlier this year, taking over the reins full-time now of the storm-damaged Chevrolet, and he's going to be keeping the legacy alive. Glad to see that. The debut, for us at least, of that beautiful retro-bodied Virginia Giant designed by none other than Gideon Bernard, the promoter here this weekend. Cliff Val getting that thing together, the beautiful bullnose back in action, the silver and blue retro scheme Virginia Giant, and Brandon Darrow, the local hero representing the state of Virginia alongside Cliff Val. Those two are definitely going to be fan favorites. If we have any kind of a cheer-off, we can tell you that those two are at an advantage. We're going to take you through two shows of highlights that will lead us up to some awesome action under the lights. It starts under the sun, though, on this afternoon in Dublin, Virginia, and it starts with the guy I mentioned, gets his second weekend behind the wheel, Kyle, the guy they call Bucket Seasock, out of Frackville, Pennsylvania, one of two second-generation drivers, driving some of the equipment for Donnie Hebert out of the state of New Hampshire. The brothers out of Pennsylvania, you can see Kyle just trying to get his legs under him right now, get that spatial awareness down, but not having too much trouble. A score of 15 only as he attacks the race lanes head on. He'll have more for us, I guarantee you that, as the season goes on. CJ Menti in the 73 square body, storm damage out of Clarksburg, Maryland. Trying to pick it up a little bit there, a score of 20 here in the stunt showdown competition. Now playing hooky, awesome looking new machine, the 95 Chevy, soon to be tow truck out of Frackville, Pennsylvania. Again, the equipment out of the state of New Hampshire. Seasock working the track in the tight confines, picking up the pace with a score of 22 to get his afternoon started off. Now, here it is, the Virginia Giant Cliff Val, the PEI-REI hybrid out of Fairfax, Virginia. And believe me when I tell you, there were fans of all ages that could not believe their eyes when this thing rolled into the valley for the first time over the last few weeks. Still running that big Brad Anderson Hemi, still with those Josh Garcia tuned shocks and that awesome chassis. Been getting him by for the last couple of years. A score of 21, was looking for a little more there, but not bad for Cliff Val. final competitor, and again, a home state favorite, Brandon Darrow out of Elkton, Virginia, and Bad News Travels Fast. Known more for the slap wheelies, but you can see how tight it is here. There's not a lot of room to carry one out, and the consistency of the dirt can make that difficult as well. Still, though, a nice pair of moves, sort of a throwback kind of a show to these old fairground shows. They come and throw down just a solid straight line course, a score of 24 for Brandon Darrow in the stunt showdown competition. Would take him to the number 1 spot. Great fans on hand under the sun here in Dublin, Virginia, and that would take us into qualifying round action. And this is where it gets important as your points add up. Keep in mind as we go through the competitions here that we're about to show you, only the top 4 make it into the racing bracket. So you'll want to be quick in qualifying, not just for lane choice, but if you fall into the number 5 spot, you don't get to race. Seasock still trying to get the feel of this thing, not wanting to overdrive it, not wanting to do any damage after a shot with a time of 4.63 seconds to open the field. SamsonMTfan was up next in storm damage out of the state of Maryland, looking to pick up the pace. Speeding things up a little bit, a 3.58 second run. Over a second faster for the soon-to-be veteran driver out of Clarksburg, Maryland. And interestingly enough, we'll tell you a little more about this, but that chassis is almost identical to the one you just saw go down the track with the square body, J.R. Seasock and playing hooky. Much improved here in this near lane, a 3:55 for Seasock out of Frackville, Pennsylvania. And interesting story behind that chassis and body combination we'll tell you about as this weekend goes on. Cliff Fowl, number 4, to come out and try his hand in the left lane. Took him a second as he got a little out of shape in no man's land and pitched him to the left, but once he got that Brad Anderson Hemi horsepower to the ground, he was able to lay down a time of 3.30 seconds to take the number 1 spot at this point. Final qualifier, of course, 5th truck in the field, Brandon Darrow in the Bad News Travels Fast Chevy Silverado out of Elkton, Virginia. Didn't even let the truck settle when he got to that final ramp. Jumped almost to the base of that final jump, a 2.97 second elapsed time to put him into the field. Kyle Seasock would be the lone fallout there. So the first round matchups coming up when we come back to Dublin, Virginia. Don't go anywhere. Racing and freestyle from Show 1 are coming up next.
This Back Channel Productions program is brought to you in part by Monsters Monthly. Stay up to date with photos, videos, event info, and more at monstersmonthly.com. And by Crush This. For an inside look at the monster truck phenomenon, check out Crush This, a Monster Truck podcast.
There's only one place in the world you can find this much old school cool. Freedom Racing Monster Trucks. The home of Cyclops and Unnamed and Untamed. Get yourself a limited edition toy at freedomracingmt.com.
This Back Channel Productions program is brought to you in part by RPM Army, the place to get your motorsports fix.
Very fitting matchup to open up our round number 1 competition. There you see the J&B chassis Storm Damage, owned by the Menti family out of Clarksburg, Maryland. And there you see the sister chassis to it, another J&B chassis now owned by Donnie Hebert out of the state of New Hampshire. J.R. Seasock at the wheel of Clayin Hookie, an identity that he created and put on top of that machine, and very fitting that these two trucks that came out of the same camp would match up in round 1 of racing. Seasock able to get the truck to settle a little bit quicker in no man's land and used it to his advantage for that final lunge across the finish line. Like I said, it's a short burst of horsepower course, but that's what a lot of us in the Valley grew up seeing over the years. And the Shenandoah Valley is one of the favorites of the Shenandoah Valley and one of the next-gen favorites of the Shenandoah Valley. Now do battle another fitting tribute to the Old Dominion here. The Elkton, Virginia Bad News travels fast, matching up with the Fairfax, Virginia Giant. Good ride for Darrow. You see Val getting a little bit out of shape in between the jumps, and it cost him some speed. Darrow would move on to a championship battle, a pair of Chevrolets, a pair of Silverados, 2 separate generations of Silverados. Darrow goes right back to the starting line with the cut tires to match up with J.R. Seasock out of Frackville, Pennsylvania. Would the Keystone Killer be able to knock out the Old Dominion favorite, the family man, Brandon Darrow? The whole family standing right behind our camera crew. You'll hear him cheering him on and off throughout our coverage. But J.R. Seasock not about to hand him a victory. It doesn't matter you're in your home state. You got to earn it in the dirt in straight line racing. Absolutely awesome matchup from both of those guys. J.R. Seasock trying to hang on to it. Watch it again. Nearly identical start. Seasock actually had a bit of an advantage into the last ramp, but he jumped a little to the right and had to back out of it to avoid getting over near the wall, and that gave the win. A very gracious final round loss and a very gracious winner. The local favorite, Brandon Darrow, and Bad News, picking up more points on this Overdrive Tour season. Now, on into freestyle. We're going to take you through these highlights kind of quick here. Kyle Seasock, again, we keep mentioning, brand new to the wheel of this truck. Got to give him time to get used to it as he threw down a couple awesome moves here. Not afraid to go after the backs of those race lanes. Learning a few lessons there about getting the truck shut down, but again, no harm, no foul, just bumping into the back of that K-rail that, in fact, they're going to rip out for the nighttime freestyle. Gets a big hug from his brother. Very happy to finally be out here alongside Bucket as CJ Menti would come out to flex his muscle, carrying on his father's legacy here in Storm Damage. Anybody asking why they're not watering the track? Believe me, they are keeping this track watered. This is a road pack. This is not Virginia clay that they're running on here, and it's actually very hot out here under the Dublin, Virginia sun. It's baking the water right off the racing surface, so don't worry about that. They're keeping it maintained. You actually see the dark spots where the water wagon went around. Now, J.R. Seasock, glad to be back in the wheel, starting things off the center jump. And keep in mind, there is not a lot of room to run around here as Seasock trying to get used to a different rear steering setup than what he was traditionally used to. Remember, he got his start around his father, John Seasock, and at the wheel of the higher education cool bus, which had the old school rear steering setup. You wanted to turn the truck left, you would turn the rear wheels to the right, you hit the toggle switch to the right. You want to turn the wheels to the left, you hit the toggle switch to the left, and that would swing the truck around to the right. So he tries to get used to that here as we take a look at some of his afternoon highlights, but he did step up the pace with a score of 24. Cliff Fowl now, the Virginia Giant. originally out of Winchester, Virginia. Cliff about to put a ton of horsepower out of that big Brad Anderson Hemi into this dusty racing surface here in the Shenandoah Valley. Really doing a nice job in spite of the space, picking up the momentum, getting some hang time, keeping the speed up, keeping the noise level up, and Cliff Fowl trying to raise the bar, and definitely a fan favorite here as he steps out to the adoration of a crowd. The score of 27. Move him into the number one spot with one machine behind him, and that would be Brandon Darrow in Bad News Travels Fast, the Sign Pro sponsored Chevrolet out of Elkton, Virginia. Dusting down one of the cleanest trucks in the business. You talk about a team that keeps their equipment shined and beautiful and aesthetically pleasing even under the lights. All the LEDs and the flashers they've got on this thing, you will see when we come back at twilight for show 2. But a score of 28, Brandon Darrow coming out of this first show of this new series. A little old school action, putting him in the number one spot with the overall. We are not done though. Show 2 coming at you when we come back to Dublin, Virginia. Back with more highlights from the New River Valley Fair here in Dublin, Virginia. Good crowd on hand, and you can see the sun is setting over the Blue Ridge Mountains, and that means that it's time for the night. Kyle Seasock starting off the stunt showdown in Aftershock, looking to put a few more points on the board for him, trying a few more moves here than he did in his first session under the sun. Again, just getting the hang of this machine. Didn't want to do that right there, but still laid down a shot in Aftershock for a score of 14. CJ Menti was next out in Storm Damage, trying to pick up the pace again in the square body Chevy out of Maryland. Almost makes it look too easy as he just sort of quietly makes his way over the obstacles. Looking to come back around for that second hit. We're very interested to see what he was able to do. Looking to see if someone would hit that center mound, and he didn't do that, but nice job there, raising the bar by 1 point for a score of 14. As these guys trying to keep Brandon Darrow from taking yet another victory here in Dublin, Virginia. JRC Sock and playing hooky. Chevy-bodied machine, the 95 Chevy-body J&B chassis truck out of New Hampshire. The driver out of Frackville, Pennsylvania. You can hear the blower whine out of that awesome big horsepower motor in the back. Just getting it warmed up, trying to feel things out. He was worried about having problems with his front drivetrain. It looks like it's hanging in there. A score of 16. They like that pair of old school sky wheelies. And Virginia Giant Cliff Fowl rolled out to try to one-up JRC Suck. Totally different sounding piece of equipment here in Virginia Giant with that Hemi horsepower. And with minimal operating space, doing a nice job, a score of 22 for Virginia Giant. Final competitor up, of course, Brandon Darrow out of Elkton, Virginia. In the awesome Bad News Travels Fast, trying to knock off Cliff Fowl, 22. Big air for the big Chevrolet from right here in the Shenandoah Valley. Would he do it? Remember, 22 was the score to beat. He would post another 22, and that means that the season points, 5 points out of that competition, would go to Cliff Fowl in the Virginia Giant, who posted the 22 first and thereby picked up the best trick victory. Now, aftershock, Kyle Seasock rolling into stage for qualifying. Round action. Remember, he posted a 463 in his first qualifying run. That was his only race pass on the course, trying to get used to what this truck is capable of. A lot of horsepower in this big engine. Consistent, if anything, a 461, so only 0.02 of a second off of his qualifying session number 1 time. CJ Menti trying to get in the field. Remember, only the top 4 go to the racing bracket. A nice smooth run for Menti as the sun sets, and again, you're wondering why they don't water the track. They are keeping the track watered. It is just that silty a surface that they're racing on now as JRC Sock gets ready to try to knock down CJ Menti in playing hooky. Beautiful run there as he shoots for that 363, and it would be enough, a 333. 0.3 better than the former teammate to this chassis, so pretty evenly matched pair of trucks right there. Cliff Fowl and the Virginia Giant looking to upset all of them again here in front of the home state folks. Would love to pick up a race victory behind the wheel of this awesome bullnose Ford. Picked up the front end when he took off, kind of getting some grip there on the starting line. He wasn't before, but a 325 would move into the number 1 spot coming out of the qualifying round. So Cliff Fowl looking good in Virginia Giant here in his home state, as he knew he would have to put down quite a time to do battle with the other home state hero, Brandon Darrow, and Bad News Travels Fast. Darrow again with a hard charge all the way through, really attacking the track for a time of 3.05 seconds for the big Chevrolet out of Elkton, Virginia, and that would set our pairings again. Kyle Seasock, not making the bracket, but getting a little more seat time every time he hits the track. Stay with us. Racing and the final freestyles of the weekend from Dublin, Virginia are coming your way next.
Hey, welcome to Wild Man Adventures. We're at the Silver Lake Sand Dragway. There really wasn't any off-roading back then. It was all off-road. We're on our way to Lima, Ohio. Got wooden wheels.
Oh, it's slippery as all get out.
Hey, we're here with Rich Cummins. Hey, we're here with Mike Potter.
Hey, we're here with Alan Pizzo.
Gotta check it out. This week we're gonna go down memory lane.
Welcome back to Dublin, Virginia for our Show 2 highlights now as we get ready to bring the first pair up here in round one. And you see them rolling out of the pits there. Cliff Fowl in the Virginia Giant taking on J.R. Seasock in playing hooky. Now, been a lot of stories coming into this week and a lot of trucks we haven't seen before, some identities, some designs we haven't seen before. Well, the one on the far side, that 95 Chevy body that is on that J&B chassis, keep in mind, that J&B chassis ran originally as one of the storm damage hurricane force trucks. The body that is now on it ran on the second hurricane force chassis as Carolina Crusher during the TNT Unfinished Business event, and then later as Porter Force on the Eddie Micah chassis that was recently sold by the Menti family and now found its way back onto an older Menti chassis, now the old J&B Hurricane Force chassis that Stephen Thompson drove for many, many years, now with J.R. Seasock behind the wheel. Another close matchup, but you saw coming off the line that Fowl picked up the front wheels and kind of dribbled the front end to the first jump. Maybe a little bit too much horsepower off the line, hurt him there. He got to the first jump quickly, but a little out of shape at the end. The margin of victory, no more than about 1/10 of a second for J.R. Seasock out of Frackville, Pennsylvania. Good looking out on the end there, by the way, for those two guys as they turn into each other to not hit. Now, the Menti family chassis. There he is, C.J. Menti in storm damage in the 70s square body Chevrolet, one of my personal favorites as a 70s Chevy square body owner, going side by side with a newer gen Chevy Silverado, that being Brandon Darrow in the Patrick chassis. Bad news travels fast, and this family has kept that name alive after purchasing it from Bruce Haney many, many years ago, celebrating the 25th anniversary of that identity. Outstanding pass for Darrow would put him into the final round once again with J.R. Seasock in the 95 Chevy playing hooky, soon to be a 95 Chevy tow truck. Right now, though, just a 95 Chevy playing hooky. The Frackville, Pennsylvania driver doing a good job jumping back into the monster truck industry after a little bit of a hiatus. It's good to see him back out here with that bright orange helmet on, and he picks on a bad boy in the sport in Brandon Darrow. And these two guys will match up for, I believe, the third or fourth time this year. Darrow seems to be able to get the best of Seasock every time. And I can tell you right now, as they came to the line for this matchup this week, and the final shot they had at each other, by the way, here in Dublin, J.R. Seasock was chomping at the bit to finally get past Brandon Darrow. He knows he's got the motor to do it. He knows he's got the truck to do it. And he knows he's got the driving skills to do it. It's not a long track. It's a burst of horsepower track, but believe it or not, how you navigate that first jump can be the difference between life and death in this racing bracket. And you can see Seasock taking his sweet time, staging up, trying to put a little psych job on Brandon Darrow. But Brandon Darrow, one of the hardest guys to psych out in this business. He is cool, calm, and collected at all times. We knew we were in for a heck of a final round race between the two big Silverados, one from Pennsylvania, one from Virginia, the final race matchup of the weekend in Dublin. I can tell you right now, if Seasock could have kept that thing from turning left on him, he may have been able to slip underneath of Brandon Darrow. Not even slip underneath. He may have been able to outdrive him there, because if we watch this again, there was a slight advantage off the line as Seasock tried to cut the tree on Brandon Darrow there, cutting it close. And believe me, they have been struggling with that staging light all weekend long. Both of them cut a good light. Seasock was out of the hole quick, but Darrow had his foot to the floor, using up every ounce of shutdown space for that final round battle as Seasock talked to crew chief Nick Wishart.
It hooked, and I'm like, no, he got me.
Again, gracious in battle, gracious in defeat, gracious in victory. Good friends off the track, fierce rivals on the track. As we get into freestyle highlights, the final freestyles from the weekend. Kyle Seasock trying to step up the game a little bit here for himself. Again, learning how to be spatially aware in these trucks. Keep in mind, the first time he actually drove a monster truck was a week before this event. It was only his second time behind the wheel. And you can see much smaller space than a lot of guys would like to start in, but a lot of the best drivers in the business start in small arenas on small speedways between walls, and that's what you have to get good at before you can really throw one of these big monster trucks around. Seasock again, just getting used to the size of one of these vehicles in a small space. A score of 13 for Seasock to set the pace for everyone behind him. Not setting the world on fire, but not damaging the truck. Getting a feel for it as CJMNT comes out, and a little bit of trash talk had occurred in the pits before this run between him and J.R. Seasock. I'm not going to tell you what was said, but JR said he was going to come out and go for that center jump, and a little conversation ensued. So CJMNT is not about to lay down in spite of running in this tight space. Putting just a little more in the ramp, but you can see jumping it in the short side. You run out of room real quick as he headed towards Sean Baker sitting over there behind the wall in the loader. If you were going to crash a truck here, that'd be the perfect place to do it. They just pull you right through the fence. Menti turning the crowd on under the lights here in Dublin. Score of 20, raising the bar, stepping up in front of this guy, J.R. Seasock out of Frackville, Pennsylvania. One of the two second-gen Seasock brothers. And glad again to see these guys back behind the wheel. JR wasted no time getting out onto the track and trying to chase some obstacles he'd been talking about hitting. But you can see right there, again, I mentioned earlier, him trying to get used to this rear steer setup, turned it the wrong way a couple of times. It's all you're seeing happening there. And not to take anything away from him, been out of the seat for a little while at hiatus. You can't really tell, though, as he's definitely not lost his spatial awareness, which is all important in monster truck competition. No fear at all for the playing hooky driver, other than maybe keeping the equipment underneath of him. But he and his brother and Tanya and everybody back home working very hard to get these trucks where they want them to go on tour this summer. Short and sweet, the crowd loving playing hooky, and I guarantee you when he gets the boom on this thing, it's going to become a fan favorite as he jumped into the lead with a 25. Now, the raspy cackle of the big Hemi horsepower Virginia Giant from just down the road in Fairfax, Virginia. About a 2-hour drive for this gentleman to come down here and entertain these fans. And doesn't matter how far from home he is, he's always going to turn it on, and glad to be doing it. Says he's got better visibility than he's ever had. He likes this new bullnose body. He said the way they had to cut the fender wells out, the way it wraps around the cage, he's actually able to seat down through the floorboards better, and it's making him drive a little bit harder, and you can definitely see it in his driving style. He's going move to move to move. Big hit right there for the Giant, and something you may be noticing, a lot of these guys going with the spool or the locker in the front end, not valves, still sticking with that open front end design, and it's actually helping him here. He can really pivot right around the inside tire and keep it moving on a tight track like this as he turns this home state crowd on. Smoking a little bit out of that big Hemi, but it always tends to. Wrapping up a solid run, and Cliff would also like to throw out a thanks to Eric Bidlack out of the mud racing fraternity, the Dirt Drags, who helped him get a new intake for that truck. He was down on some parts, so got Cliff back out on the track. So big family of motorsports always keeping up with each other as Brandon Darrow, Bad News Travels Fast, comes out to wrap up freestyle and our highlights here in Dublin, Virginia. Darrow working the track super fast with that fuel-injected Richard Midget 540 cubic inch Chevrolet engine. Kept up with that baby blue color scheme from last year, but in celebrating the 25th anniversary of this identity, of this machine that Bruce Haney put on the track 25 years ago, there's a little bit of each color of each body this thing has had over the years. All these guys doing a great job of working with the space that they had. Darrow, though, scoring a 24 in freestyle, and it was not enough to jump him over Cliff Val or J.R. Seasock. But in the cheer-off, the victory would go to Cliff Val in the Virginia Giant, meaning he would pick up the 5 points from freestyle, knocking J.R. Seasock down to 4 points. But both of those guys picking up the pace and scoring 25 in their freestyle. Is a great start to this Overdrive Monster Truck Tour, and believe me, this was just a warm-up show for these guys. The crowd loved it, but this tour is only gonna get wilder from here. Thanks for joining us. We will see you next time.